Hi, welcome back to Bounce Forward with me, Tiff Hall. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Today on Bounce Forward, the fitness dietitian Leanne Ward is back on the podcast, and I'm so excited to chat to her. She has a new book out called Reset, Nourish, Burn, and all the links to her podcast, working with her personally, her book will be in the show notes so you can catch up later. But today's episode, we're going to focus on weight loss across the silly season because I know a lot of you are trying to lose weight and shape up over summer. So we're going to hit on that. So let's get straight into the chat with Leanne now. Leanne, welcome back to Bounce Forward. I'm so excited to have you on because I've been devouring your book. I love it. I wanted to get started, though, talking about Christmas, silly season. Everyone's freaking out about food. They tend to just go nuts over Christmas and then try and reset in the new year. But do you have any tips for eating nutritiously and not just letting it completely blow out of control over Christmas?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me back on the potty, Tiff. Very excited to be here. And I guess Christmas eating is one of those things that we all struggle with, right? We're only human. There's a lot of food around. There's a lot of socializing. And it's kind of the time of year that I say to my clients, remember that Christmas is just one day. Yes, there's a lot of food. Yes, there's a lot of socializing. But I think psychologically we give ourselves permission to almost like write off the rest of the year. And I think that's where we kind of run into problems. Some of it is more that mental aspect where we just go, oh, screw it, I'll start my diet on January the 1st. But really, I love this time of year to set some goals and really put things into perspective because do we really want to be starting January the 1st 2 or 3 kilos heavier, feeling just heavy and bloated and just not great in ourselves? Or could we use December to really focus on the positives, like how can I add more vegetables in? Do I have to drink at every single social occasion? Could I just do a little bit of meal prep to set me up for a really balanced week so I'm not always on the back foot with all of my meals? Could I join a gym in December instead of waiting until January? Because January, I hate my gym in January. It's so busy. But then by February, it's like a lot quieter again. So I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And I was saying to my husband this morning, I'm going to dread it in another month when it's going to become so busy. But then it just there's this steady drop off rate. But I think if we build these healthy habits in December, they're much more likely to continue long term rather than starting this really strict diet or gym challenge or regime in January. And then we're basically off track 2 or 3 weeks later because the research isn't very promising, is it? Like those who start really strict New Year's resolutions are generally off track by February. It doesn't last that long, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is that one of your biggest mistakes you see people make in terms of sticking to healthy eating over this period? Like what are the biggest mistakes you see?
Yeah, honestly, the biggest one is not being consistent. And the reason that people can't be consistent is, like I said, it's just that mental game. Like they've basically just given themselves permission to have the entire of December off, forgetting that Christmas is really just one day. So we can still exercise in December. We can still eat balanced meals. We can still go out, and maybe 1 or 2 times of our eating occasions each week can be a more indulgent meal. But also we could order a salad. Like if we've got 2 lunches out, 2 catered morning teas, a couple of dinners and a brunch out on the weekend, do we have to indulge in every single one of those occasions? The reality is, no, we don't have to, but we give ourselves permission to write it off thinking, oh, I'll be good in January, or, oh, I'm not starting my diet yet. And so I think it's a real mental battle at this time of year. But the biggest issue I see is not being consistent. And most people aren't being consistent enough because they're being too strict. So they're all or nothing. They're on the diet, they're off the diet. They're completely written off December and they're waiting to start again in January. So they're just being far too strict with things rather than trying to be balanced. Like I said, we can have some drinks and enjoy December, but do we have to drink at every occasion, particularly if it's one of those occasions that's fully catered? So you've got the canapes, but let's be honest, they're not lovely. They're not serving us scallops and beautiful fresh seafood. It's crappy deep fried dim sims and spring rolls with cabbage in them. Like they're not even that good. The alcohol's a bit dodged. Like when was the last time, you had some really nice alcohol at a catered event? It doesn't really happen. So save it for the beautiful meal that you're going to enjoy with your family or with your friends and order that stunning glass of French champagne. Save it for that. Don't go ham at the Christmas party where, let's be honest, the food and the alcohol isn't really that great and you feel crap the next day. So really just be a bit picky. It's okay to be picky at this time of year. We don't have to say yes to everything. And if we do, we're probably going to regret it by January. So the biggest thing I see most people struggling with is not being consistent because of that mindset. They're too strict. They're either on the diet or off the diet. But instead of making it a diet, make it a lifestyle. You can't aim to lose weight in 6 weeks. If your goal is to lose 10 or 20 kilos, you didn't put it on in 6 weeks. You're not going to get it off in 6 weeks' time. So give yourself time to do that. And why not start in December? Like, what's the benefit of waiting till January? Why can't we start to build in some healthy choices now? So when it comes to January, we're on the front foot and things don't feel anywhere near as hard or overwhelming. We're in a great routine with the gym. And let's be honest, if we haven't exercised for the majority of the year, start in December because it's way quieter. You'll have the opportunity. It won't be as overwhelming. There won't be people sitting all over the machines. You'll be able to get the ones that you want.
Yes.
And same deal with nutrition. Like, build some healthy habits now, which are going to carry you through to January, February, March later on. It doesn't have to be this all or nothing. Nutrition and health doesn't have to be black and white. There's a lot of gray area in the middle that we can find as well.
So talking about those healthy nutrition habits that people can pick up now in December without the all or nothing attitude, what are the top, nutrition tips that you would give people to start with if they're wanting to lose a bit of weight, wanting to shape up a bit over this summer period?
Yeah. So the first one I like is what's called the crowd out principle. Have you heard that before?
No.
Yeah, so it's the crowd out principle. So generally when we think of healthy eating, losing weight, being quote unquote good with our nutrition, we think about restricting, right? We can't have the sugar, I can't have any alcohol, I can't have any takeout. When you think about the crowd out principle, focus on what you can add into your diet. So crowd out all of those delicious festive treats, crowd them out with a ton of nutrient dense foods. So think all of your colorful fruits and veggies and salads. So instead of saying, I can't eat the potato bake, I can't have the mimosa, I can't have the Christmas pudding, crowd out your plate with all of the colorful veggies and salads. Get some roast veggies on your plate, some, mixed greens, some grilled capsicum, some really nutritious, dense foods, and then add a little bit of potato bake, then add a few, fresh prawns and some roast turkey, and then have a little bit of pudding or trifle or whatever you want for dessert. So focus on what you can add in first and crowd out the rest of the things with a really well-balanced, nutrient-dense plate.
Yes, I love that.
The crowd out principle is the first thing that I'd say I really want people to focus on. So rather than thinking, I can't have this, I can't have this, I can't have this, because the minute you think restriction, your brain wants something 10 times more. Like, you and I both have small children. Like, when I tell my nearly 3-year-old, Mia, don't jump on the couch, the only thing she wants to do is jump on the couch. When you tell your brain you can't have something or you can't do something, it only makes you want it 10 times more. So when you say to yourself, I can't have any alcohol, I can't have any Christmas treats, sugar's banned, it's bad for me, you want it 10 times more. So rather than saying to yourself, I can't have it, say, let's crowd out my plate with so much nourishing food, but still leave a bit of room on the plate for all of the other options as well. So really focus on an abundance mindset. Focus on the things that we want to add in rather than the things that we can't have or we're going to restrict. And same goes with this time of year. Some really smart swaps. So with breakfast, everyone starts Christmas days with these high-fat pastries, croissants, bacon, these really heavy breakfasts. In Australia, it's so hot. Like, my kids run around in a nappy, just on Christmas Day because It's so hot. I've got a nearly 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's so hot here. So focus on a lighter breakfast. We don't have to have what we've always had just because, it's always been there. We can have some beautiful chia pudding, some fresh fruit, a bit of Greek yogurt, a nice veggie-based omelette to start with. So really focusing on those smart swaps for Christmas. And same deal with desserts. Like, make sure there's some beautiful fresh seasonal fruit on offer, a nice fresh berry pavlova, maybe some baked apples with some cinnamon and some vanilla yogurt. It doesn't have to be that there's like 32 different slices and rum balls and energy balls and bakes on the table. We can have a little, but we don't have to go overboard. And the reality is that most of us over cater on Christmas Day. I'm guilty of it as well. But also we move from, my family there's a breakfast thing, there's a lunch thing we host at our house, and there's a dinner thing, then we go to another other families up the coast for Boxing Day. Then it's my daughter's birthday on the 27th. So we just have multiple celebrations in a 3-day period. And so we can't overindulge in all of them because we feel like absolute crap. Like on Christmas Day, I wake up, I have a bit of fruit, might have a piece of chocolate or two and a tub of Greek yogurt just for that protein hit to keep me going. And I basically save myself till lunch. I'll have my coffee as well, which I have on milk. And I'm not really hungry because, you know, if my kids let me, I might have a little bit of sleep in. We're so busy opening presents, getting everyone ready, and then we're off to our first breakfast event anyway. Then we're off to another lunch thing. So the day's so busy, but we just sit around basically eating all day long and we don't have to. So making some of those smart swaps over this festive season is really important. And alcohol is the last one because honestly, in Australia, we have a bit of a problem with alcohol. We do. If we don't drink, we're the odd one out. And I've had so many clients who are making really smart choices like saying, I'm not going to have a drink because it's not in line with their health goals. Maybe they don't feel like it. Maybe they don't want it. And honestly, they have so much pushback from other people. Why aren't you drinking? What's wrong with you? The alcohol's free. Are you pregnant? And it's like, why can't we just say I'm not drinking and that be okay? So just, I guess, rethink your alcohol this silly season because alcohol is not actually good for us. Is it enjoyable? I'm not a prude. I like a glass of particularly French rosé myself. I will have a drink, but I'm very particular with when I drink and what I drink and how much I drink. So we just don't want to make alcohol a free-for-all at this time of year because, you know, from now, late November to early January, that's, you know, nearly 2 months where we can feel pretty crappy if we're having multiple alcoholic drinks each day. So really try some non-alcoholic based options as well. There's so many on the market these days. There's so many. When I was pregnant with both my girls, I tried so many. Some are great, some not so great, but give them a try because, you know, we don't want to go to a backyard barbecue or a celebration dinner with our friends and sit there nursing a cup of water the whole time. We don't just want water, but there are lots of other options on the menu that we can choose as well.
Yeah.
Don't just order alcohol because everybody else does or because it's free or because you think you should be drinking. Really be particular. If you've already had 1 or 2 special occasions that week, see if you can make 1 or 2 of them alcohol free.
Yeah.
It's just a really good option for your health and a really balanced approach to nutrition.
Yeah. They're fantastic tips. Now, I've been reading your book, Reset, Nourish, Burn. I love it. Such a fantastic read. So many tips, and I've even got all of my Post-it notes and I've got folded down the corners and I just
doggy
love
corners. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. And you talk about, in the book, you talk about emotional eating. So I wanted to talk about that for a second. Like, what is emotional eating? Really?
Emotional eating is essentially the act of using food to cope with our emotions rather than trying to satisfy that with physical hunger. So I call it 2 types of hunger. There's stomach hunger, which is our physical hunger where we're physically hungry. Like you'd put fuel into a car to make it run. You need to put fuel into your body to make it go properly. When the body actually is hungry for fuel, that's stomach hunger. The other hunger I term head hunger. That's the emotional hunger. So we're eating in response to an emotion. It might be stress. It might be boredom, it might be sadness, it might be overwhelm, it could even be happiness. Basically, what we're doing is responding to an emotional cue or head hunger rather than the body's natural hunger cue. So that's emotional eating. And there are a lot of reasons that we eat. It's not right or it's not wrong. We don't only have to eat when we're physically hungry. We can eat as a celebration. We can eat sometimes emotionally. But I think the issue for most women in particular, I work only with women, I think the issue is where it becomes our only coping strategy. So every time we're stressed, we eat. Every time we're upset, we eat. Every time we've had a bad day, we eat. Every time we're happy and we want to celebrate, we eat. So we can eat at times when we're not physically hungry. That's okay. But when it's our only tool in our toolkit, when it's our only coping mechanism, that's where we run into problems. And that's where we see women, living or existing in bodies that are 10, 20, 30 plus kilos overweight and starting to feel, have some health complications with that because there's a whole lot of fuel going in, but the body doesn't actually need that fuel, so it's getting stored rather than being utilized.
So what would be your top tip for dealing with emotional hunger then? What would be the top thing that you say, right, you need to do this?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to recognize why it happens. And I'll generally see 3 reasons. And I myself, I'm going to be honest with our listeners, I struggled with emotional eating for so many years. And until I really split the terms and called it head hunger and stomach hunger, I couldn't really get a grapple on it. Like I couldn't, because people would say, well, just don't eat. Or my husband would look at me and he's like, just don't eat the chocolate. And I'm like, it's not that simple. You don't understand. And so telling somebody not to eat or just to get over it isn't helpful. So we have to understand the underlying mechanisms of why emotional eating happens. And in my experience, there are 3 reasons. It's a coping mechanism, it's a learned behavior, or it's a biological response. So when it's a coping mechanism, what tends to happen is food provides a comfort or a distraction from an uncomfortable emotion, but it's only temporary. It's almost like a Band-Aid. We're putting a Band-Aid on an emotion. We don't want to deal with it. We're squashing that emotion back down so we don't have to deal with it. And it might work in the short term, but that emotion is always going to be there. And this is why emotional eating becomes a really big issue, because we're whacking a Band-Aid on a problem. We're not actually getting to the root cause of fixing it. So the first reason it mostly happens is because it becomes a coping mechanism over time. The second reason is that it generally becomes a learned behavior. So for a lot of people, food is associated with comfort or reward. And this goes back to a very, very young age in the majority of people, right? When we were sad, when we were small children, our parents would say, hey, we'll take some chocolate. If we fell over and scraped our knee, hey, it's okay, you're okay, get up, we'll go get an ice cream. If we did really well with our report cards, let's go out to dinner. If it's, we've had a bit of a bad day, it's all right, we'll go have some chocolate, we'll feel better soon. So it's a learned behavior. And that is so difficult to unlearn as a 30, 40, 50-something-year-old adult after decades and decades of those ingrained behaviors. So it's a learned behavior which almost becomes a habit or unconscious behavior over time. And the last one, where it generally tends to happen for a lot of people, is a biological response. So high fat and high sugar foods, some of the research has shown that it can activate this brain's reward system in the brain, which can temporarily ease or reduce down the stress and the discomfort and the sadness. It just makes us feel better. And you'll hear people say that, I need some chocolate to feel better. You ever been in a busy workplace with lots of women, particularly hormonal women around our period? I just need some chocolate to feel better. So sometimes it is a biological response. Other times it's a coping mechanism, and other times it's a learned behavior, generally from way back when we were small children, or we saw our mum doing the same thing. We saw our auntie doing the same thing. We saw a significant other. I say female because it's generally an issue that most females struggle with. Males, for whatever reason, seem to be more black and white with their nutrition. Yeah. They're like, well, I'll just eat it or I don't eat it. But women, we have these beautiful things called hormones, and it tends to be a lot more difficult for women.
Yeah, it is absolutely more difficult. I'm going to leave that chat right there and come back with part 2 very soon. Thank you so much for listening to Bounce Forward. I love having your company, so please DM me on Instagram at tiffhall_xo and let me know what topics you'd love me to cover. Don't forget to rate and review me on your podcast app. Speak soon. Happy days.